let's see. How do we?
It says we're live.
Yeah, I see that.
It's pretty
But I'm trying
exciting.
to figure out how the heck is this a link we give people? No, I don't want.
It's in the topic of the IRC channel, I think.
Ah,
I
well,
think I
yeah, that
stuck.
gets them to the page or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I stuck that up when I made the channel this morning or afternoon, whatever. I have no grip on what time it actually is.
Art, I think we actually have people watching us. All right, they see us now. For a second, you're like, I don't know if anyone's watching. It doesn't. It doesn't actually refresh the viewer count, I guess. So that's cool.
Cool.
Fantastic. So welcome to our very first live broadcast. We'll see how this goes. Interestingly, I think didn't we do this because Sean
Sean, Fairley, yeah.
Fairley, yeah, he asked us about it every single time, and we are like, well, we haven't made that jump yet, but here we are. So we'll see how it goes.
It'll either go really well or we'll never do it again. So
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Apparently, we're already impressing Chris Tankersley, so he's
good.
very he's very sorely disappointed in this episode. So
Yeah,
that's what we strive for.
that's absolutely what we strive for.
Ah, yeah, you're probably right. So now we've got some viewers coming up. So maybe it's a refresh thing, or maybe it just takes a while. I don't know. Whatever. So we'll get this thing kicked off and see how it goes. You ready, Matt?
I am ready.
All right. Welcome to the Loosely Coupled Podcast, Episode 8. Tonight we're talking about career development. I am your co-host, Jeff Caruth, and this is Matt Frost. How's it going tonight, Matt?
It's going pretty well. It's been a long day. I've actually got into writing. I spent like my whole day writing JavaScript today, so I know
That's fun.
you would be proud of me.
I am, yeah. Good job.
And yeah, my son had football practice, so I've just been kind of everywhere today. So
But the interesting thing is you wrote JavaScript all day and you're still actually alive, like you didn't implode or anything.
yeah, so I wrote. We use Angular for this project that I'm working on, and it's actually pretty awesome. I'd never used it before, like 2 days ago, and the directives and stuff are super awesome. I love it, and if I never have to write a stupid jQuery conditional to hide or show something ever again, I will be happier than a pig in slop.
All right, that's a very Texas way to say you're happy, I guess. Cool. Good
Trying to
job.
represent.
Yeah, try to represent try to represent where we're not from. Anyway, yeah.
Very
So
good, dude.
yeah, so oh, there we go.
The
We got
last rows.
the Houston Astros hat on tonight. That's great. Yeah, so career development. I thought this would be a good topic. This is something that I think it's something that you have to learn over time because it's really hard to get right. And I know early on in my career, I thought I was probably really good at this, and I was really actually terrible at just understanding what it's like. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought it'd be a good topic, and Matt, I think it's kind of a relevant topic for you recently, especially. But just yeah. So what are your thoughts? Like, where do you want to take this first?
Okay, well, so it's actually over the last probably 2 years, 2.5 years maybe, become a topic that I've been very excited about because I guess a little bit of background. I'm sure this isn't uncommon for a lot of people listening. Um, a little bit of my background is, I grew up just like everyone does.
You grew up.
I
That's
grew up.
fantastic.
That's how I started.
First bit of advice tonight is you should grow up.
You should physically.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
okay.
well, my dad's a union guy, and for a long time, it was kind of like the whole company loyalty idea. That you're loyal to your company's loyal to
Yeah.
you. You take care of them, they take care of you. That whole thing. And so I was kind of raised on that, and took that into kind of my first career, my first job actually into my career, and found out kind of the hard way that it doesn't really exist anymore. And so over the course of probably the last, and I said I've been interested in it for about 2 years, 2.5 years. So probably the last 3 or 4 years, I've had that transformation where I go from like this company is doing me a huge favor by giving me a job, and I'm just lucky to be here and happy to be here, to actually owning my own career. So I think it's a hard jump to make because we're conditioned through school and through our parents and through our experiences to be like, you have to have a job, and a job is so important, and you try everything you can not to like screw that up. But when you can kind of break away from that and start to take control of your own destiny, if you will, that might be a little dramatic. Um,
It's fairly
really,
dramatic, yeah.
yeah. Well, I try. Um, you start to get more out of your career.
Yeah.
I think it becomes more fulfilling and more rewarding for you personally, and then obviously the company that you're working for reaps the benefits of that as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you brought that up. I had a conversation with some family recently, and we were talking about kind of the differences in generations in terms of this loyalty concept, and who benefits, or like who's really owning I guess people's careers. And so like you were saying, older generation, it was you've got this pension coming or whatever, so you're taking care of it. And an example of this is my wife's or I guess my mother-in-law. She was telling me that her father worked at Shell Oil like a long time ago, and she's like, to this day, I still only buy Shell Oil gas because like that's what was instilled in me. Because like from his perspective, like they were doing great by him, so they were he wanted to pay them back by using their products or whatever, and like supporting them, and like that was what they did. And then it's like today, that just doesn't, like, that's kind of unheard of. Like it's kind of everyone for themselves, sort of. So I think that is really a lesson that I learned earlier on in my career was, you own your career, and it is definitely. I mean, I wouldn't say that you should be disloyal to your company or to whoever your employer is at the time, but there is a point where it is supposed to be a mutually beneficial relationship.
Absolutely.
Like it's not supposed to be one side is giving you a paycheck or you're providing the service. It's you're exchanging that monetary kind of thing. You're exchanging goods and services or whatever, but you're also in a relationship to get to a better place. Like the idea is to constantly improve both the business and every single employee in the company. So
Right.
That was something that I learned and started looking for in employers was, this kind of stuff comes up, and I think Cal had a blog post about this today about, the benefits that you receive by working at a company, and it's, the foosball tables and all that stuff, the movie theaters, and all this stuff that sounds cool or whatever, but really it's just designed to keep you there so you're producing longer. And so it's that concept of
producing.
Yeah, well, producing in quotes or whatever. Yeah, you're there, so you might as well. You do you
do terrible work after like 8 hours, so you're basically doing work that you're going to do again tomorrow.
I think it's more like 5 hours, but
yeah, well, 8 hours of playing foosball and watching movies, and then mixing in 5 hours of work.
I'm sure that happens, but like those things are nice, I guess. But that's not really what it's about. It's more about growth than anything else. And so like that's kind of my metric for when I need to develop my career, aka move on to a different place, is when I feel like I'm not able to grow anymore. I'm not able to improve in a certain area that I'm looking at. So that's when I start the, who can actually provide that. And then I examine the companies and, go into the interviews or whatever and ask the tough questions as an employee. Like it's not just them asking you hard technical questions. It's you're interviewing them to figure out how much of a relationship you can build together versus just, yeah, sure, I could do whatever you want. Like that's not going to get you where you want to be.
Well, so, and I had given a little bit a cryptic little bit of my history back a few minutes ago. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I learned this lesson, a little bit more specifically. And I think one point I wanted to make was I think when you were talking about like our parents' generation and how company loyalty was a bigger thing. I think if you look at the ratio between like the CEO salary and the common worker salary when they were our age, it was much closer than it is. I think it's 300 to 1 now or something ridiculous like that in our generation. So I think with the amount of money that's kind of gone up, and obviously our industry has helped with that, with globalizing the economy, and so there's good things behind that. It means more jobs for us. But I think now with the increase I guess the availability of money that's out there now, those business decisions, where 30 years ago they might have said, hey, we're going to keep this guy around, he's got a wife and kids, and we don't want to dump him out on his butt, are harder to justify from a business perspective these days. So I say that as someone, I started out at a newspaper in Northwest Indiana, and I was there for 4.5 years, and I think about, or 4 years, I don't know how long I was there, somewhere in that range. And I worked for about 2 years in the production department, working with the pressmen and the production director of operations and stuff like that. And they had offered me this, quote unquote promotion to go work in the newsroom and with the ad sales people. And it was more money, which I needed at the time, and I took it. And then like a year and a half later, they laid me off. Like I promoted myself out of a job basically. And
good job, man.
Yeah, no, but I got to that point where I had done everything. I took the company loyalty thing to an extreme. In the sense that we had a float in the 4th of July parade, and I actually wore a gigantic mascot costume, complete with a gigantic head, on like a 103-degree day, and almost died.
Is that?
Well, that's probably being dramatic too. I sweated a lot.
So is that actually on your resume?
It is, yes.
What's more a? That's
the thing. Every time you do something cool like that, put it on your resume.
Yeah.
And your future potential employers will. Don't do that.
No, I highly recommend it.
Those two.
If your resume came across my desk and it was like wore a suit in a parade float in 103-degree weather and almost died from dehydration, I'd be like, hire this guy. Yeah,
right now.
Hire this person right now.
Don't even interview him.
Yeah. I don't need to know anything else. That's all I need to know right there.
Yeah. No, don't do that. That won't. That scenario that Jeff just laid out won't happen.
No, that's.
But no, so I got there. I was laid off and was going through a somewhat rocky period in my life, and it was horrible timing, is what I'm trying to say. And really, the last 4 years have been kind of horrible. So.
Yeah, but so what did you learn from that?
Well, I learned from that. It was a very simple lesson. Actually, I had 2 kids at the time and a house that I had to pay for, and ironically, it was a job I had kind of. I was like, I need to move on. I need to get out of here. And I'd had that thought many times and never really done anything about it. So I learned that companies don't care about you as a general rule.
Yeah. Okay. So as a general rule, sure.
I'm not saying. I'm not saying that no company, cares about you.
Every single company doesn't care about you.
Right.
You're just a resource to everybody.
But if you go into a new job or reflect on your current job or whatever, and you think, and your primary thought is, this company really cares about me as a person and individual, I would just say be wary of that.
Yeah.
And they may prove to you that they do, and if they do, then that's fantastic.
I think solid advice around there would be something like, you know, don't go into any or don't make any career moves under the assumption that you're going to die there, right? Like I'm gonna work here until I retire or die,
Yes.
whichever comes
Yes.
first. I mean, don't assume that you're just going to be there for the rest of your life. Like I think that's the key is to just be aware of where you are and where you want to be. And so like that's kind of the thing that I wanted to talk about. I guess now would be a good time.
Bring it
Is
on.
when you're thinking about what you where you are right now. So you have to look at what are my skills right now? What am I doing with those to help my current company or whatever? So you have to frame every kind of decision that you want on how it helps you in your current situation. So whether you're self-employed or you're working for somebody or you are CEO of the company or whatever, like you have to frame where am I right now, and then think about that, and then figure out that whole question that people ask you and say, hey, where do you want to be in 5 years? And you really have to think about that kind of stuff. And it doesn't have to be 5 years or 2 years or 10 years or whatever, but just sometime in the future, like where do I actually want to get to? And then from that, you have to figure out how you can leverage or how you can leverage the resources that you're given or the resources that you're provided at your company or whatever to get you from where you are to where you want to be. Like that's a
Right.
constant conversation that you should be having with your peers, you should be having with your bosses, you should be having this conversation. Like keep a dialogue going of, you know, where am I and where's the next place I want to be. So for some people that may be, right now I'm a junior front end engineer, but what I really want to do is work in a back end system. So like, how do you
Yeah.
work on those skills? Like, if your company will support the ability for you to learn those skills and get there, you are responsible as an individual for figuring out the path how to get there with
Right.
the help of other people. Like they can help you, but it's not it's not something that you should assume is going to be just handed to you. Like no one's going to hand you the skills that you want. You have to figure
Right.
out what you want to learn and figure out how to get there.
I think one thing I want to touch on because I know this was true of me. When that question would come up, where do you want to be? What are your career goals? Where do you see yourself in X number of years or whatever? Um, it took me a while to actually get to a point where I could answer that question with confidence. I think, well, I want to get better. It's kind of like when we talk about like PHP mentoring sometimes when people come in and they're like, all right, well, what do you want to be mentored in? I just want to learn all the PHPs. And it's
I
like,
want to be a
okay,
better
well,
programmer.
yeah, I want to, my client needs the next Facebook. Um,
Don't Please don't come into the channel and say that's what you want to do.
anyway, yeah, but so you have that, and you kind of go, okay, well, if someone's going to mentor you, you're going to have to, yourself kind of focus on some key components of the PHPs that you want to learn, so that someone can help you achieve those. Because it's like anything, there's building blocks, right? You start out with one thing, and then you can use that to build into other skills. And um, career-wise, it's the same way. I just had a really hard time when I was younger. Um, I guess, I mean, I always kind of knew what I wanted to be, but articulating it wasn't always easy. Like, I just want to do awesome stuff, and my bosses and coworkers were supposed to know what that meant.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, I would say a key component is if you don't know right now, like where you want to be, it doesn't have to be 5 years. 5 years in this industry is an incredibly long time. You might be on like PHP Vortex or something by then. Sorry.
PHP XP.
Yeah, I had to throw a PHP naming joke in there.
Yeah. Well, you
Um,
have to have those.
you gotta have it. Um, so maybe not 5 years, but figure out what you want to do in the next year. Do you want to pick up a new language? Do you want to learn Do you want to get more involved in a certain aspect of the code base at your day job? And do you want to, get to a point where you can kind of be left alone to work on that? You don't need hand-holding. Set some measurable goals.
Yeah.
I never liked the goal of learning a language because, at what point do you look at yourself and go, oh, okay, I've learned this language, right?
Yeah, if you want to learn a language, listen to our previous episode about polyglottism.
Yeah. Good plug.
That's our thoughts right there. Yeah, no, so kind of what you're saying, like, when you're trying to think about this kind of stuff, you say, what do I want to do? And you're like, well, I don't really know where I want to be in 5 years. And that's I think that's valid to not really know. Like, it's difficult to think about, well, in 5 years I want to have a mastery of this particular subject or whatever, but I think you need to take it back a step and say, like, who do I respect, and like what level are they at, or where, or what are they doing, or what are they interested in, and is that something that I think would be interesting to me, or if you are lucky enough to be at a large enough company where you've got like some more senior level people, or people that are more senior than you, and you admire what they do, or you really are interested in what they do, go talk to them, or go find a mentor, or go find Matt and ask him, here's where I am. Like, what would you say?
I'll point you to Jeff.
Yeah. Where would you say is the next step, or what would you say? What would you do in this situation? And maybe it's good advice, and maybe it's terrible advice, but sometimes, for me anyway, even if someone tells me something that's completely wrong or completely off base with what I'm actually asking them answering the question and giving me something will kind of trigger the light bulb for me and make me think, oh, wait, no, that's what I want to do, this, even though it's different than what you said. So I think and that's a hard skill for people to learn, I think, is, giving advice and having people not actually taking it or whatever is, I know for me that used to be really, really frustrating. Someone would come and ask me,
right,
how do I do this? And you say, oh, it's simple, just do this. And they're like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that. You're like, well, why'd you ask?
I already tried that, and I did it wrong, and it didn't work.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but I think that's just something that you have to get used to. Is there's going to be people that give you advice that's bad. There's going to be people who give you advice that's bad advice, but it helps you think of something. There's going to be people who give you great advice that you don't understand or are not ready for, but that's just called life. Yeah. So,
well, it's about getting people to think. Really, when you come down to it, it's, like you said, bad advice. I know for me, the same way, it causes me to go, well, that's a horrible idea. How can I take what this person told me to do that was terrible and I'm never going to do?
Well, it's not fair. You say that to everything I tell you, though.
Yeah, I know. But how can I take that advice and figure out a plan that doesn't suck? Now I kind of know what sucks. I know this sucks. I'm not going to do that. So what are my other options? It causes me to kind of think and at least rule stuff out. And I think with, like, when you're working with people and they come to you at work and they say, hey, how do you do this? And you, like the scenario you just laid out, and you say, well, I would do it this way. And they say, okay, well, I'm not going to do it that way. There's a chance. Sometimes you're just dealing with incompetence, and you have to understand that too. But sometimes, people will understand it, the underlying concepts of what they're doing better by getting a little piece of advice, and maybe they don't take your whole all of your advice, your whole solution as a package and implement it, but maybe they take little things out of it and it helps them understand the underlying concept better. And maybe it goes to code review and it doesn't pass, and you say, no, you should have done it my way, and that's fine, but they understand more how they got there and why they got there.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think it's interesting how many like coding concepts that we talk about in terms of working with other people and working with all different types of code. How many parallels there are to actually developing your career as opposed to developing code. I think it's I think as you get more experience writing code and dealing with people and dealing with clients and project managers and bosses and all of that kind of stuff, um, I know for me it's kind of enlightened my path and oh okay I can apply some of these same principles to when do I leave a job,
Yeah.
uh, when do I ask for more money, when do I not ask for more money, when do I make it clear that I don't like what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, you've got like legacy jobs, right? And those would be the jobs full of technical debt. So you got like legacy careers and stuff like that. I think you're right. There's definitely parallels between career development and general coding or
Hmm.
whatever. So I just told Matt that based on his last little rant, uh, I came up with an awesome subtitle for this episode. It's called "Career Development: A Plan That Doesn't Suck," because that's kind of
That's what
what
you
he
want.
said was, yeah, you want a plan that doesn't suck. I agree.
It's
Yeah.
really what you want to go for.
So I think it's brilliant. But anyway, so kind of along those lines, how do you, Matt, as someone who's been doing this for a while, like
But
how do you
leaving jobs?
no programming or
Oh,
being a
okay.
developer? How do you personally plan your career? What is your technique? I mean, I know we're kind of talking about hypotheticals of,
Sure.
hey, go talk to someone, but like how do you go about figuring out what you want to do next or whatever?
Yeah. For me, it's kind of because I don't have. I have kind of a wandering mind, and I tend to look at a lot of things and become interested in a lot of different things that I know I'm probably not going to get in one job,
Yeah.
and so my I would hesitate to even call it a strategy. Um, Especially early in my career, I think I'm becoming more strategic about it now. But it was always kind of like oh hey, that sounds interesting, and then I would do it. And I mean, I've never really left a job like super early. Like I said, my first job was like 4 years. The job after that, I think, was like 2.5. And then Cinecor was my shortest one. That was almost a year and a half, which is I'll admit that's probably a little short. Um,
I
but
think
yeah,
it's
it's all
okay.
yeah. I mean, it's not. I've never had like a do this for two months and then be like, this is terrible. I want to quit.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I'm not saying that that's good or bad. Everyone's got to make that determination themselves. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's kind of been like I'll do something and I try to give everything that I do a fair shake. Um, and I kind of watch for what I was told when I started and how close to that my day to day actually is.
Yeah.
So if I'm told um, I'm going to be writing back end code, custom back end code for clients, and I end up not doing that and find myself kind of continually not doing that, um, that at least prompts me to have a conversation, which I'm again another thing that I'm getting better at. I didn't always do that. Sometimes I was just kind of like, whatever, screw this, I'm going home. But I've gotten better about having that conversation. Like, look, I'm really not feeling um, fulfilled here. I try to stay away from the this isn't what I signed up for. It's just kind of sometimes you can't control it. Sometimes the business interests change from when you started. Even within 6 months, and they need you doing something different. And
So you don't
you,
take a copy of your offer letter slash job description and read it verbatim back to your boss and say, that's exactly what I'm gonna do every day when I come in.
no, I try to avoid
Oh yeah.
talking to people, so I just usually stick it to their door with a knife.
That's a good plan.
Yeah, no, I've only done that once.
Only
Um,
once.
yeah, so I mean, I to kind of transition from that, it was kind of like let's try it out, let's give it a fair shake, and if it doesn't work, I can always move on.
Yeah.
I'm getting more strategic now in the sense that I have a much better idea of what will make me more employable over the course of my career, whether that's picking up new skills um, or getting really good at one specific skill. I found testing, ironically, isn't a great skill for that because most people think that you're just wasting time. Like, yeah, I really want to start testing. I'm like, yeah, well, we'll get back to you.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, interestingly, that's kind of a
it's kind of like don't tell them you like testing. Just go there and test.
yeah. Well, I mean, I would say that yes. I would say that that shouldn't be like your primary objective, and I'm sure Grumpy is gonna stab me or something for saying that. But um, I think it is a useful skill, and there are places that will value that. Like a prime example is where I am now at Liftopia when I was interviewing to come on full time. Um, Basically, it was presented in a way that said, look, we don't really have any of that type of practice in place. Like we don't have tests and stuff like that, but we think it's a good idea, and if you're willing to take on the challenge of doing it, then we would love to have you. So it's kind of a,
Mm-hmm.
and I realize that that's kind of a rare situation, but I would say if that's your passion, like if that's your thing, then by all means pick up the skill that you find fun, or pick up something that you are passionate about, because it all boils down to at the end of the day, if you are not happy with what you're doing because they treat your testing passion as something that's just a nice to have or whatever, then
Right.
you're gonna be you're gonna be miserable at the job. So you're gonna be leaving, and you're not gonna be growing. You're gonna be frustrated and working long hours or whatever. So
Right.
yeah, so there's
Yeah.
that. And I think another thing you brought up that's brings up a good topic is part of career development is not only learning the technical things, but
Mm-hmm.
also learning the soft skills involved in what we do. So like we're talking about having conversations with your boss, and there's a conversation going on in the IRC room right now about how do you negotiate for salaries, and how do you have, I guess, more of these conversations that are difficult, or how do you deal with people. And I think that's something that's hard to do without working on the soft skill side of things. So for
Yeah.
me, you have to spend some of the time that you would be learning a new language, or learning some new skill to add it into your resume, to working on how do you communicate effectively, how do you negotiate effectively, like how do you get through all the process that you need to be successful and happy. Like how do you learn those skills, and how do they fit in with what you want to do. So prime example of that would be you are you're a developer, you're an engineer, whatever. You want to get into management. Well, management
Why would you want to do
requires. Why would you want to do that? I don't know.
that? You want to do that?
No, I'm just saying if that's what you wanted to do, if you wanted to actually get into management requires significant soft skills work. You have to be a good communicator. You're not going to be a tech lead. You're not going to be a mid-level manager, development team manager. You're not going to do any of that stuff if you can't communicate well. So you could be the smartest person in the whole room, but you're never going to get above, senior engineer level or lead engineer level. Like you're never, or probably not lead engineer, but you're never
Yeah.
going to get past a
Senior.
certain level.
Maybe principal.
Yeah, principal perhaps, but because you don't have those skills, so you have to think about where you are and where you are and where you want to be. Like how do you match those skills and figure out getting beyond your current circumstances, I guess.
Yeah, I think, and it's funny because I think with a lot of things, like when I first started, and I guess maybe this is just my path. Like when I first started, when I was at the newspaper, which you wouldn't think would be like a super like corporate environment. And I mean, if you were in the newsroom actually writing stories, you could wear a banana hammock into the office and no one would say anything. But if you were outside of that, never happened. I don't know why my mind went there.
That's rather distracting.
But
Nice, for example.
okay, how about flip flops? Is that a better?
That's a better one. Yeah.
Okay. Man, I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, the point is, I started out in a very, it was very corporate. I wore a shirt and tie every day, if you can imagine that. Wore a shirt and tie every day. Um, at the time, I had some tattoos that I really liked, and I had this whole like plan, like never to go past my elbow, and so everything was like everything about myself that I liked was kind of squished into this kind of conforming role of like, well, there's a certain way you talk to people, there's a certain way you dress. You can share your ideas with people up to this level, but once it goes above that level, then you have to tell your boss, and your boss has to tell those people because you're just a little peon and you can't talk to the other. I mean, it's a nightmare. I mean, if you're in a corporate environment, you like that, cool, but wasn't for me. And so yeah, I got really shut in, and like most people, I mean, I don't know a ton of people that really like talking about money in terms of specific figures. Like, yeah, yes, I want to get paid. Like, that's an easy conversation to have. How much would you like to get paid? As much as you're willing to pay me. You know, it's a difficult conversation. So I found that as I moved out of shirt and tie, you know, only talk to the person sitting next to you, hands on the keyboard, you know, counting keystrokes kind of environment, and got to be myself a little bit more, that I was able to kind of open up and have some of those more difficult conversations. And the hardest thing for me, I think, and this is always in the kind of like I'm looking for a job situation, the hardest thing for me was always, you know, how much do you want to get paid? How much do you want us to pay you situation. And
Yeah.
when I got to the point where I had decided in my head on the lowest number that I was willing to take, and realized that by giving that number to certain places that I may not get a job there, and being okay with that, being okay with like, because, you know, I've always been very competitive, and like if there's a goal, if there's a job, I want to get an offer for it. And
Yeah.
you know, it's like if I don't get an offer, I feel like I've lost somehow. And so being like, okay, you know what, this is the least amount of money that I'm willing to take. I know that, and I know that that's gonna maybe price me out of some positions, and I'm okay with that because truly this is the lowest number I'm willing to accept.
Because you're worth it, Matt.
That's what my mom tells me. You know, I think that's, but it's hard. It's hard to have those conversations. I just recently, when I left Synacor, had to have the, hey, I'm not, you know, I feel like it's time for me to move on, and there's not really anything you guys can do about it. Not in a mean, vengeful way, but in a, I've been here long enough to know how things work, and I don't think there's anything you can offer me that's going to improve my situation here.
Yeah.
And you know, being able to have that conversation just like openly and honestly, and say, hey, I'm looking, hey, I got an offer, I'm going to take it, came a lot more naturally this time than it has in the past.
Yeah, I think that's important to be able to do, or important to at least attempt to do. In my previous in a previous departure from a job, I had been talking about certain things, you know, for months. You know, I'd been, you know, I'd like to see us doing this, and I'd like to see this happening, and you know, how can we get from here to there, or whatever. And none of it happened. And you know, I of course didn't know. It was kind of a similar situation where, you know, I've got a boss who has a boss who has a boss who has someone in a very expensive suit and tie somewhere, and so it's like, okay, I tell my immediate boss something, and then hope that this gets through, or this message gets all the way up, or whatever. No idea if it does or not. So then when I'd finally had enough that I felt like I wasn't able to do anything that was really improving my personal career or improving my abilities.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, I'm going to leave. So I found some other place, or I got an offer somewhere else. And then I went to my boss and I said, I'm just letting you know that I'm leaving or whatever. And we had a little talk, and my boss at the time totally understood, and he was like, yeah, I kind of saw this coming with all the stuff that you'd asked for, and just didn't get, we just couldn't get it moving or whatever. And then I went to the next level of boss and talked to them, and that was when the whole, well, what can we do to get you to stay here? Or, now you're our best friend. We'll change. We promise we'll
Yeah.
change. And it's like, I hope you do. And I was like, and I will be happy to sit down with you in the next couple of weeks or whatever and have a detailed explanation of why I think you should do certain things or whatever. But just know that I'm not going to be here because you need to learn the lesson as much as I do. Like, this is important for both of us to understand that, just throwing, a few dollars or throwing some small perk or whatever at someone, that's not why I'm leaving. Like, I wasn't leaving because of money necessarily. Like, granted, I was getting more money leaving, but that wasn't the motivation. The motivation was personal growth.
Right.
So I think that's something that's important. But the money thing, I do want to talk about that because it's come up and it comes up a lot. How? Okay, so the first thing that comes up a lot is, how do you negotiate a salary in the initial offer or whatever? So you're,
Mhm.
you're
Yeah, that's a good topic because I've never actually done that.
Yeah, and it's a tough topic because there's so much advice and there's so many weird things that go on. Like, people, a company's coming in and they're interviewing you and they want you to come work for them. So they say, hey, um, what do you get? What'd you get paid at your previous job? Or list your previous salaries from the last 3 jobs or whatever. And they just want to see what
Other
what
people thought you
motivated
were
you
worth.
or yeah, what other people thought you were worth and what was motivating you to move. So if they see
Mhm.
like continual increases of, let's just throw out a number of $10,000 between the last 2 jobs or whatever, they'll say, okay, so we can probably have him or her for $10,000 more dollars. That's what they'll think. And so you have to think of it from a business perspective, and this goes
Mhm.
back to that whole loyalty thing. The business is not in it to pay you as much as you're worth. The
Right.
business is in it to pay you as little as it takes to get you there or
Yes.
to keep you there. That's what the business is there for. So you have to think about that when you're going into it. So my advice for interviews or for figuring that out is exactly what you were talking about. Is you have to be realistic with yourself. Like, what is your current situation? What is your current skill set? And what is that worth to you? Or like, what do you think that is worth to the company? And then how much or like how little are you willing to accept, right? Like,
Mhm.
what is your bottom line and what is your ideal line? You have to have those numbers in your head ahead of time. But don't run into the question of, well, what kind of salary are you looking for, and be like, I'm looking for, let's just throw out a number. I'm looking for $97,385 a year. Like, don't like come up with this ideal number and just be like, oh, I'm gonna throw that out there. You have to it's a negotiation.
Do
So
you know someone that's done that?
I actually do know someone who went into jobs with an ideal number and said, and just came out with that and was like, I expect to get, I think it was like, I expect to get $120,000 a year. And he was coming from a job where he was making, I think, $50,000 a year. So he was expecting like
Like a hundred
a
and
huge jump, which,
20%.
where he was and everything, I can kind of understand the possibility. But skill set wise, I mean, that's a really tough pill for them to swallow if they know that information. So you really have to just think of what is the minimum amount I'm going to accept, and then what is my ideal amount. And when you come in, be upfront with the people about, where is the ballpark you're looking, and then they'll negotiate. I think this advice that's in the IRC channel right now too, but they'll negotiate below that number. Like, that's what always happens is you come in,
Yes.
you've got an ideal or whatever. So they pick a number, and if you can stomach the number that, or if you're not insulted, I guess, by the number they come back with, and you can figure out a way to negotiate back up in different ways. So there's, salary is one thing, signing bonuses and stuff is another,
Right.
other benefits packages, all that has to be considered,
Hmm.
but come in with an ideal number and stick to your guns to get there. So
Here's a question based on kind of something that you said that I've wondered about. Um, it seems like kind of a ballsy move, for lack of a better. Here I go with banana hammocks and ballsy here in the same podcast. It's ballsy like a banana hammock, and when people, I've heard some people say, and I don't want to throw. I have someone in mind that I believe said this, but I don't want to be wrong, so I'm not going to mention them by name. That when other companies, like a company that you're applying at, asks you for your salary history, that it's in your best interest not to give it to them. I mean, obviously not to be confrontational about it, but to politely decline, as it's none of their business.
yeah,
What are your thoughts on that? Whenever people have asked me early in my career, they asked me a lot more than they do now.
yeah,
I don't know. I did something like 30 interviews in like a year and a half. So I
yeah.
don't know. I've seen just about everything.
So what are
Um,
my thoughts on that? Is that your question?
yeah. What are your thoughts on like politely declining to share your salary history?
Yeah, I think a lot of it kind of depends, for me anyway. So personally, if I'm going into a position that is significantly different in responsibility, um, then what I made at the last job is completely irrelevant.
Right.
So they don't need to know that information. So I'll tell them that. I'll say, well, I mean, it's not really relevant because here's the skills that I have, or like
Hmm.
here's the justification for why I think I fit this job, and then here's what I think building of those skills and hiring those skills is worth. And so like I would give them a number in a ballpark around that as opposed to, well, I made let's use even numbers. So I made $60,000 as a WordPress plugin developer or whatever last year, at some shop or whatever. And now you're wanting me to do backend work that's in Framework 1 or whatever, which I have some, or Zen Framework 2, I have some experience in, but they're completely different jobs. So like what I made as a WordPress plugin developer is not the same as what I would make as a backend developer. So they're different
Right.
skill sets. They require different experience and
Knowledge.
different knowledge. And yeah, so I wouldn't give them salary in that case. But if it's something that I'm kind of comfortable with, I'm not gonna like give them my pay stubs or whatever. But I'll tell them ranges. Like I'll
Yeah.
say, you know, this job this job is a senior level whatever, so I think it should be in the range of this to this or whatever, and see from there. Like I don't know. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to. Well, there's definitely
Yeah.
a wrong way to do it, but yeah,
I will not give you my salary history.
well, I would err on the side of never giving that information. Just kind of uh, telling them what you think that particular role is worth.
All right. I mean, because the reason that I ask, right? People. I know when I got my first job, and I keep going back to the newspaper, like I don't know, it's gonna become like a thing now, but I wasn't getting paid very much. It was my first job out of college, so I didn't really expect it to be like a really great paying job, which is probably my naivety. I probably could have. And anyway, that's just retrospect in my own mind here.
Yeah,
The reason I ask is when I go into a job and I say, okay, um, I kind of look at it as, okay, here's the role, right? Here's the job description. Here's what you expect this role to be doing. My first thought is always kind of like, okay, well, I know I can do this stuff. I'm a good fit for the job description that they have there, but I've had very few jobs where what I end up doing 6 months later or a year later or whatever else is part of the job description. So I tend to factor in, how quickly, um, I feel like I can learn things, and what other skills that I have that maybe aren't in the job description that I can, testing being one of those that I can introduce into, right, and adding value that way. I feel like I'm trying to, well, I don't feel like I am. I'm trying to build a case on why putting me in this position is worth what I'm saying that it's worth, whether it's 60,000 or 90,000 or whatever. And by giving out that information that, well, yeah, I had this job out of college and I didn't get paid very well and I stayed there for a long time, so maybe I'm only making, 40,000, but I've learned and grown and gained a bunch of skills, and I believe me filling this position now is worth 80,000. Most people, if you tell them that you made 40,000, you're not going to get 80,000.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is
you're giving them a reason to not. You're basically giving them information that's going to prevent them or prevent you from getting what you honestly in your heart of hearts feel like that position is worth.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is, or makes a lot of sense, is as long as you can justify what you're asking for,
right,
that's the key. Like don't just assume that because you're jumping jobs that you're entitled to a 25% raise, or you're entitled to, in that case, 150% or 100%,
any
or 100%. Don't assume that just because you're moving jobs that you are entitled to a raise. Like sometimes it's a decrease in responsibilities or whatever. So having a raise is just a nice thing. Jumping laterally is better, or whatever. Like maybe it's a better situation for you as an employee. So
right.
So there's that. So
upward mobility. A different company structure that you might be able to move up and get promotion.
Yeah.
And job titles and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the how do you get a salary, right? Like how do you get your initial salary at an interview or whatever. So
yeah.
Then the next question is, you're in a company. How do you deal with or how do you know when you are ready for a promotion? Like is that something that you sit around and wait for your manager to notice and give you what you want, or do you talk to your manager about it, or do you demand that you get a promotion or leave, or do you just take what I consider the easy route, especially in our field in 2014 anyway, is you're ready to move up, so instead of dealing with any of the work behind convincing your boss that you're ready to move up or whatever, just go to a new company. Like there's plenty of them out there. It's pretty easy to do. Like, how do you make that call?
Okay, so what I like to do, and this is usually before I take or accept an offer, usually before I even get one. So like in the relatively early stages of interviewing, is I try to set the expectations. I think as someone going into a more corporate, bigger, I won't say corporate, but a bigger company, they tend to have things like wage increases. I don't know if scheduled is the right word, but they at least usually have a method to their madness, right? It's whether it's on your year anniversary or whether it's the end of every fiscal year, where they'll review and kind of analyze where you're at. So I try to get as much of that information as I can up front. Like, do you have a process for, regular wage increases? Is it only merit-based where someone has to notice? Is it a scheduled thing where you have performance reviews and the whole shebang? And from there. And unfortunately, I've worked in places where you get that information and you're like, oh, okay, so we get a performance review. I can handle that, and some of the places we even did a half a year that wasn't tied to a raise, but it was kind of like a check-in, like, is my performance review going to be okay, or is it going to be not good? And I've worked in some places where they have all that in place, and then things just don't go well, and then they send that email out like, well, if you're lucky, they send an email out, and everyone knows from the top down. It doesn't always happen that way. um, that there will be no raises this year, right? And so that's a possibility. But I've had good luck, I guess, in the sense that everywhere I've gone, there's been kind of that process like outlined, like we're going to review we're going to review your performance over the course of the year. At the end of the year, you're going to feel something out about yourself, and then your boss is going to feel something out about you, and then it's kind of merit based on how you do on that performance review. As far as actually like some places where they're just like you have to like compete for your manager's attention with other people, and there's maybe 5 developers and there's one promotion, and how do you go about doing that? I wish I had some advice. That sounds frankly horrifying and awful to me, because I would have 4 other developers that I would be competing with that wouldn't necessarily be like totally focused on working together and getting the best solution. Long story short, I don't have any advice for that, for walking into your boss's office and trying to convince them that you need more money or you deserve that promotion.
Yeah, but not just that. So how do you decide that you do deserve it? Like how do you set those personal expectations?
Unfortunately, in this country, I'm going to get all political here. Unfortunately, in this country, we've gotten used to this idea that we deserve a raise every year.
Yeah.
And we do, and if you don't get it, then it's somehow a slight. And
actually, I'm gonna actually you.
Oh, you're gonna actually me?
Yeah. Actually, see, a lot of times that is true with cost of living increases and with healthcare and stuff that we have in this country. A lot of times, you can actually do math at certain positions. And figure out that unless you get at least a 1.8 or 2% raise, you're actually losing money. That is something that I would say you do. Like in those situations, you definitely do need to get a raise every year. Like that's a situation where I would leave.
Right. You may need to get a raise every year.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are entitled to that raise. That's a need that you have.
That's true.
And if the company that you're working for is not willing to provide that need, meet that need that you have, then you're kind of up a certain creek without a paddle, unless you find a different creek to swim up. I'm terrible tonight. What am I doing?
I don't know. I think you must be drunk.
I'm not drunk. I don't get drunk. I drink. I teeter on the edge.
Okay, so I'm gonna answer my own question now.
Yeah.
I think
what do you
fun.
think?
But for me, like how you decide that you're ready for a raise, and I'm kind of ignoring the.
It's not like a
cost of
baby.
living stuff. What's not a baby?
You're like. When you prepare yourself and you're ready for it's not like you're bringing home a newborn kid like
well, it is kind of right. Like you can
no, I mean you could, I guess, if you had more money, but no, it's I don't know. Okay, I'll let you finish. I interrupted you. I didn't actually like you did to me, but I did interrupt you, so go ahead.
Yeah. So ignoring cost of living and everything, like ignoring all of that and assuming that you're at a position where you're not having a crisis because your health insurance went up 9% or whatever. Like assuming you're not in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
For me, what I would do is I look at what have I been doing for the company. Like what is my kind of job role, and then what have I actually been doing. So for me, that often means that I'm a senior engineer or whatever. But I also do some stuff where I'm mentoring someone else at the company on personal skills or something that's not just technical. So I'm doing something that's not really part of my job per se or not normally expected. So I'm growing as a person in that regard. So once I've figure out that I've acquired some new skill that helps with something,
A very
then
specific set of skills?
a very specific set of skills over a long career, yes. Once I've figured out that I've done that and that it's providing value back to the company, like once I'm providing more value than I was 3 months ago or whatever, that's when I say, okay, now I'm ready to have this baby of a raise and
Your little bundle of dough.
go talk to my manager and be like, hey, here's what I've noticed I've been doing or whatever, and to me that's valuable. Like what are your thoughts? Like, is that something that we should incorporate into my position, or just have the conversation with my boss or with my manager that way and say, is this something that I should continue to do? And maybe that means he or she says no, that they hired me to be engineer, so that would be a time when I would say, okay, well, I actually want to do this. This is something that I like to do, so that would be a time where I start looking for somebody who does want me to do it.
Peace.
Or peace or whatever. Like, that's a decision that you have to make at that point. So how you decide that you quote unquote deserve a raise, it depends on the responsibilities and what value you're providing. So you just have to think of yourself. It is always a cost benefit analysis to the bean counters. So you have to figure out, am I going to pass that test in some way? And then that's when you go and have that very difficult conversation that says, I feel like I'm providing more value than what we originally negotiated, or whatever. So let's talk about that. And maybe that's done on an annual basis at your reviews. Maybe you do it before your reviews, so you have ideas of where your reviews go. Or maybe you have weekly one-on-ones with your boss, and you are able to have that conversation kind of an ongoing basis. But
those are good to do, by the way. If you I don't know, some people may be in a position where they can suggest doing that. Just having a quick 15-minute to half-hour meeting every week with their boss, and especially if you're in one of those like super political places where you're kind of competing for like your boss's affection and attention, professional affection. This is a family podcast. Just being able to have that that FaceTime.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of communicate, like you can. That's the biggest thing. I think the biggest complaint that I had heard at some places where we didn't do that, or where you only did it once a year, was, I'm at a place halfway through the year where I don't know if I'm necessarily meeting the expectations that my boss has for me.
Yeah.
I don't know really even what my boss's expectations for me are, because we had our performance review half a year ago, and so being able to kind of work on doing things, improving things that you need to improve, and maybe not spending as much time on the things that aren't a priority to your boss, because at the end of the day, like, we all want to get to a point where we're very, well-adjusted, have a very diverse skill set, and can do a plethora of things. But at the end of the okay, well, or you want to get whatever, you want to get really good at something, or you want to learn a bunch of things, whatever your goal is, right? We want our goal to be met.
Just have one.
I was just throwing out examples.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the company that I'm working for is paying me so that I can do what they want me to do.
Yeah.
Right. So if I really want to become an expert in let's just pull something out of a hat, like OAuth.
Why would you want to do that?
Because I don't know. Because you can get famous.
You're writing a book on it?
I wrote a book. My book's done. I meet my deadlines, sort of.
Burn. Get some burn gel.
Yeah. Here, I'll get you a list of burn clinics. No, so yeah, you have to kind of, if your goals, the point I was trying to make before we got off track there, if your goals are kind of aligned with what your company wants to do, you have a really good chance and really good opportunity to meet those goals and still work for that same company. right? Because you're kind of both rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
When your company has maybe a really broad uh, vision and you are very narrowly focused, or vice versa. You're very broad and they're very like, we want you to just do WordPress plugins until you die. Um,
Which wouldn't take
you have
long.
yeah, it'd take like a week.
Sorry, WordPress.
You get caught up in the loop and it just pulls you under. Sorry, I don't have my normal filter tonight. Yeah, so you have to kind of look at that, like, and the more information you can get from the people that know where the company is going and what what their plans and what their strategies are, the more you can kind of align yourself and go, okay, you know what, this is good. Maybe I don't need a raise because maybe I'm going to get or a raise just yet, or a big promotion or whatever, because I can see we're rowing in the same direction and I'm going to be able to develop my skill set and meet my goals, and that's going to help me out more in the future than potentially going somewhere where we're rowing around in circles, or our boat's flipped over and our picnic basket's all wet. Sorry.
What is wrong with you, man?
I'm trying to come up with examples, and they're terrible.
The rowing thing is okay, but where did the picnic basket come from?
I don't know. Like, I think of like a horrible disaster. Like, you're rowing to a picnic place and your canoe tips over.
You're in a canoe? Like, what is?
And your sandwiches are all wet. Anyway.
Yeah.
Because leaving a job's always a risk, right? Like and I think that's why a lot of people are hesitant to do it, because you've got, like, even if it's terrible. That was a funny comment, IRC. Sorry about that. Anyway.
Go read it, please.
What?
Go ahead and read it.
All right, well, Joe just said, today I learned Matt programs boats.
Which, interestingly, is an improvement over his previous go-to example, which was ditch digging. So I think our first 3 or 4 episodes referenced ditch digging in some manner. So now we're moving on to canoes and picnics.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah. I'm like the Ron Swanson of this podcast. No, so like you know what you have, right? You're it's a little bit of Stockholm syndrome. Like, it's terrible, but you know what it is and you know what to expect. And there's always that possibility that you could go to a job and it could be awful and different, and then you don't know what to expect, and then you freak out and cry yourself to sleep at night. So I think that's why a lot of people, and myself included, in the past, have been so afraid of leaving jobs, because you sacrifice a little bit of that. I could be doing something more, I could be making more money, I could be making a bigger impact for, well, at least I understand this level of crazy.
Yeah, but I think that's also, there's the other side of that, which is it is also a risk to stay at your job. Like, it's a risk to stay where you are as much as it is a risk to take a new job. Like, yes, taking a new job is often an unknown. Like, you don't know if you're being sold a bill of goods when you're talking to the people, and that's a skill.
Never.
Yeah, but staying at your own job. A comment Joe made in IRC just now is he stayed at an old job so long that just because it was something that he was new or something that he was comfortable with, and I think that's another risk is stagnation of skill set due to the environment that you're in. So there's risks either way, I think. So I think the important thing is to always have a forward picture of where you want to go. Like, have a roadmap of what you want to be doing and learning, and focus on that, not just in the context of, I want to be doing this because that's what we do at this company. Like, I want to be doing Drupal development because we use Drupal here, or I want to be doing, think beyond just the technology, think beyond just those skills. Like, what do I actually want to do with my life?
Yeah.
And always have that picture, because that's going to help you make the decision of whether where you are can get you there, or whether you have to go somewhere else and take that risk of unknown stuff to get out of your comfort comfort zone or whatever.
Yeah. No, I agree. So there was one more topic I wanted to talk about, and I was thinking maybe since we got people in IRC, maybe once we finish up this topic, we can take questions if they have any. Since we're doing this live and interactively, maybe that would be good.
Yeah, well, now that you said it, we have to.
Crap, we can always edit the podcast. No, that's so the one other topic that I wanted to touch on, and this is kind of a touchy topic, but is dealing with terrible people.
Terrible people or difficult people or
Yeah,
you're
terrible
talking like
might have been.
sociopaths or
No, yeah, you should always just run from the social. That's it. We can cover that. We'll knock that one out right away. You just run. Yeah, just people that are not pleasant to work with. I mean, we've all been around them. I count myself very fortunate that a very large number of the people that I've worked with in a lot of the other jobs have been very nice, and I've gotten along with them and stayed in touch with them and all that kind of good stuff. But we've all had people that we worked with that we kind of wish we didn't know. Is that fair to say?
yeah, I guess so. I'd probably word it a little more tactfully, but sure.
Well, this is, as you can tell, I'm fresh out of tact tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess so. Let's put it more tactfully than I just did. Let's say that there are some people that you find that you have a slight difficulty in working with, and it's affecting your job performance and your happiness and your whatever else, your mojo, whatever. How do you go about broaching that conversation? Because that's a very, I think that might be the only conversation you can have with a boss that's scarier than money.
Yeah. So how do you communicate that with your boss that the effect on you is not necessarily your own skills of your own doing, but it's environmental based on a certain coworker, or
Yeah.
is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Sure.
yeah. Again, so this is what I was talking about earlier with the whole idea of, soft skills is learning how to work with people because believe it or not, there are human beings in the world other than yourself. So you do have to interact with people of differing personalities and differing ideas and such. So I think that conversation it really is going to depend on the situation, which I know kind of sounds like a cop out, but when you're talking to your boss, you just have to explain the factors that are affecting you. So this is why I'm a big fan of like weekly one-on-ones and even quarterly updates or whatever, to just really have that dialogue continuous where it's and when I say weekly one-on-ones, I don't mean you meet with your boss every week
bitch about somebody
for 15 minutes and gripe about somebody, or you meet with your boss every 15 minutes every week and you just do a status update of where you are in your current project or whatever. Like, it's 15 minutes where you're talking about your goals, your relationship with the company, how you can do better, and then also how your boss can do better, how your company can do better. And so I think that's kind of where that conversation would come up. It would say, I'm having difficulty staying focused on my task because I'm having difficulty dealing with this particular situation. You could bring up the coworker, but not in a griping kind of way, but just in a way that says, a lot of time was spent on dealing with this interaction or walking away from it or whatever. Like, just explain that that's an issue that's come up and you want to figure out a way to work through it.
Okay.
A good boss will then kind of help you figure out how you can either distance yourself from that particular problem or help you figure out how you can resolve those issues better. So maybe they offer some uh, some mentoring in terms of like conflict resolution or whatever. Just like maybe they come up with some way that your skills can improve in that area, and then they also take the time to then go find that other person and work with them. And it doesn't have to be in a way that says, "Hey, well, Matt came and told me that
Yeah.
you disagreed with him about this, and you wouldn't budge, and you were really mean about it or whatever."
You were
Like
being
they
a
would probably go to
d-bag.
them and talk about how they present their ideas. So
Right.
to me, that conversation would come up naturally in a, here's issues that I'm having. If on the other hand you're only doing that conversation once a year, that's never going to come up. It's just going to bottle
Right.
up after over weeks and weeks, and then you're just going to quit. So always push for a constant dialogue as opposed to something that happens occasionally. Like those are important things to have. So that's my answer to the question is make it happen in a continuous
So
fashion.
handle it like you'd handle any other issue in the office.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Like maybe your coworkers don't flush the toilet or whatever. Like, figure out a way to communicate that as being something that's environmentally impacting your sanity at the office. And it doesn't have to
And
be
sanitary environment.
yeah, and so like any situations that come up, you have to
Yeah.
figure out a way to communicate them. And I usually phrase them in terms of how they are affecting my personal performance towards goals that are decided or goals that are created with my boss in terms of helping me improve and the company get to its goal. So
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of deciding factor there.
Okay.
Does that
I
make
was
sense?
just curious. Yeah. So I've only left one job where a person or persons was a contributing factor in my departure,
Yeah.
and I was just curious to hear what you had to say because I always wondered, kind of going back, how I handled it. And this got to a point where there was, and I think this is probably more prone to happen in not super corporate, quote unquote, professional environments, which I think that word is a load of crap, but um, and it actually like got to a point where there was like shouting matches, and to a point where like during the stand-ups, I would just like check out.
Yeah.
Like I would just go sit in the corner and not say anything. I would sit at the stand-up, which in some companies will get you drawn and quartered.
That's rebellious, man.
And well, I've always been kind of a bad boy.
That's overhearable, by the way.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, so I don't know. It's interesting to hear that because as you were talking, I kind of got to where you were going before you got
Zoned out.
there.
Oh, no. I thought you were going to say zoned out, but carry on.
Yeah, no, I wasn't paying any attention to what you said. I kind of I kind of got where you were going before you did. I mean, you knew, but before you said it. I mean, I guess I don't know. I agree with you. First of all, I will say that.
Good. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of how I want to say this. I might be better off just not saying it.
You agree with me, but
I don't know that there's even a but
well, actually,
or a well actually.
you could do it.
Okay, I'll throw a but in there.
Yeah.
I think. Well, I know because the situation existed for me, so I know it's probably happened to at least one other person in the history of the world, where there's someone that is so over the top, obnoxious, or disagreeable to you, or just you absolutely cannot work with a certain person. Like it's physically impossible. Like, and that's, when I talked about paddling that boat and it tipped over, this would be the person that actually tipped over your boat. And I've gotten to situations where it's kind of been like, you either keep them or you keep me.
The
And
coworker ultimatum.
yeah, yeah. Um, which is it's a sad place to be because, like I said, I've been really really fortunate throughout my whole career to work with a lot of people that I really. I mean, I still when I go back to Northwest Indiana, I still go to the newspaper and see my old boss and see a lot of my old coworkers and enjoy doing so. Um, so it's kind of an outlier in my career, and I would imagine in most people's career because most people are somewhat socially aware. Um, I always wondered if I handled that correctly. And I mean, would you ever get to a point where you? I know I'm not really asking anything. I'm just kind of like saying words and expecting you to talk. Um, like I don't know. Would you handle a situation like that? Let's just go hypothetical here and presume that it had happened.
Okay. So there's someone I just can't agree with on anything. It's
Yeah,
frustrating.
and it gets to the point where you kind of like get excited when they call us sick.
That's pretty bad.
Not that they're sick, but that they're not there.
Yeah, no, I got you.
Yeah, I'm stopping short of wishing harm.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, do you ever see an instance where having the keep them or keep me conversation is ever a good idea or a viable one, or is it better to if you find yourself in that situation and you've done kind of the normal route of bringing it up in somewhat regular meetings and just nothing's being done about it? Is it better off to um, just kind of like look for a new job and leave?
Yeah, for me personally, um, I would say I probably would have already been bringing it up in conversations,
Yeah.
but assuming that I didn't, like assuming that I hadn't ever brought it up and it reached the point where I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. I had to go to my boss and explain this, or go to someone and explain this. I would probably handle it in a way that just explain to my boss or explain to whoever that, hey, I'm in this situation where I feel like I can't be productive because conflict with this particular person
Hmm.
takes all of my energy and all my time and all of my desire to actually do this. And then I would say, so I'm going to start looking for, or I'm looking for a way out of it, and find out and figure out what my boss would say from that. Like I'm looking for a
Okay.
way out of the situation, and then you never know. It could be that there's able to be some sort of reorganization or restructuring or or get you in a point where you're not having that conflict anymore,
Right.
or maybe it's obvious to you at that point that the only move is for you to leave. But I don't think I would ever go with the ultimatum approach,
Yeah.
personally, just because I feel like that's really very egotistical way of approaching the problem of saying like I'm important enough that what I'm really saying is you should fire that other person. Like that's what it says to me, and I would never do
Okay.
that. I would say if I would explain that problem, and then if it's really a problem with you, chances are it's a problem with
Others.
somebody else as well.
Yeah.
So it's up to the boss then to recognize that and deal with it appropriately. And whether
Mhm.
that's firing that person or whether it's you leaving, like that's what I would do. Like I
Okay.
wouldn't, yeah,
Well, live and learn.
live and learn. I mean,
YOLO.
but it again, like it all depends on
Yeah.
your boss and your relationship and
Yeah.
everything like that.
Well, I think
All
a
depends.
good like attentive like well connected boss will
Would recognize it
recognize it and will see
for sure.
that. And I will say in that situation, the specific one that I'm talking about, where I ended up kind of. I don't know that I actually gave the ultimatum, but I kind of like hinted at it. I kind of like
Yeah.
passive aggressively, like, so there's other places I could go. No, I don't think I
Yeah.
said that, but
Other people want me, man.
yeah, I'm I'm good enough. I'm smart enough.
I've got people skills.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, it had been brought up by my boss, so to be fair, he had mentioned it, and hey, I noticed there was some friction between you guys at the stand up, or you
Yeah.
weren't standing up. Um, kind of a thing, and so it was a process. I mean, it did go through a lot of it wasn't like we woke up one morning and dumped all of this on a boss's desk.
Sure.
And I think a good boss, we'll see that kind of playing out over the course of time. Because I think it's good to have disagreements.
Yeah.
At work, it's good to challenge ideas and to challenge strategies and things like that, because you end up getting a better strategy out of that process. But there's that point where you just kind of it stops being constructive, and the arguments start to kind of be the only thing. Like if you're at a place with multiple teams and you notice during your stand-up that the other team comes over with popcorn, you probably have a problem.
Yeah.
So, I just wanted to see what you thought about that, because, like I said, it's not something that people hopefully deal with like on a super regular basis or at every job or anything like that. But I think your advice is good. I think it's very measured and mature. So if you're like me, you may not have taken it at some point, but you should you should at least consider dealing with it in a kind of a measured, reasonable.
Yeah, I
Professional
personally
way.
wouldn't have taken my own advice several years ago. So
Okay.
it's
Good.
called
I don't feel terrible now.
it's called learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
So before, I mean, we may get into some questions in just a second from the room or whatever from the channel, but I wanted to kind of go over a summary according to the chat room of our advice.
Okay. This ought to be good.
So along the career development path and the salary negotiation path, the 101 level is to always use a knife in any salary negotiations or career development stuff.
I can't believe you said that.
201 is you should always wear a banana hammock. That is the best way to be successful in life. Then 301 is you should run away from sociopaths. That is solid advice for continuing to have a career by way of continuing to be alive. And then the best advice that I think I saw is if your picnic basket is wet, it's time to jump ship. So
okay, that could be a T-shirt.
That should be a T-shirt. We should let Phil know, and he may get on that.
Yeah.
A way to incorporate PHP into there somewhere.
Camping is intense.
So that is I think that is a pretty good summary.
I think so too.
Of our advice. We could have just totally written that as a tweet or something, and we would have been done. But yeah. So
this is going well.
Yeah. 202 is okay. So apparently level 202, which is right after 201, is to negotiate in your banana hammock with a knife, and that's the way to get the best returns in your negotiation tactics. So
I really hope no one's taking this seriously.
This particular list or this whole podcast?
I think the jury's still out on the podcast, but definitely the list.
Yeah. So anyway, are those
all from Chris Tankersley? Did he compile this list?
I think he compiled the list. Yes, that's Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Dragon Man Tank on Twitter. You should follow him and tell him how awesome his list is.
Yeah.
He's a very good listener.
I see a book coming out of this.
Yeah. The Dragon Man Tank Guide to Career Development. I'll take royalties for the title name. You can pay me for it later, Chris. Thanks. Yeah, so let's find out if anyone has any questions.
Okay.
I don't know how delayed our audio is actually. So.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I think was there one earlier? I thought I saw. Maybe not. Maybe not a serious question. I think they were asking you some questions, Matt, about would you want to fight 100 duck-sized J. Caruths or one J. Caruth-sized duck? That's a good question.
I think I would take the one duck.
You just want one me-sized duck and you'd fight it.
Yeah, dude.
Ducks are pretty brutal, man. I don't know if that's a good idea. Okay, so here's an actual serious question to get us out of our
Out
list.
of our malaise here.
So we talked about not giving a salary history,
Okay.
but to use your own number, like your own estimation. So I guess the question is like, how do you figure out how much you're worth?
That's
That is,
actually a really good question.
yeah, that is definitely a fantastic question. For me, uh, I would do that by I would look at job postings. I would look
Hmm.
at things, and if they have salary ranges or something like that, which a lot of them don't, they all say uh, depends on experience or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's
But
kind of gone by the wayside. It used to be when I was in college. It used to be very prominent where they would have a salary range. The last 5 years, that's kind of by and
yeah,
large gone away.
it has. So another resource that I would personally use if I was doing this right now is I would contact someone like
Yeah,
Lonnie Brown, and ask him something like, "Hey, here's my skill set, or here's my resume, or whatever." Like, just have a conversation with him and say, "Would you be willing to give me some information about, uh, or some information about where you'd be able to place me, like salary wise, like what you think I'd be able
yeah,
to do?" And that would be a
yeah.
good way to do it.
Chuck,
So,
Chuck just put something in there for the I don't know. It says DOL wage statistics.
Department of Labor.
Oh, is that what that is? Okay.
Yeah, Department of Labor wage statistics. I personally haven't used that, but that is
Yeah.
in the channel.
There's
So
also services like Glassdoor. I don't know if you ever used or heard of Glassdoor. Um,
I have
where
not. No.
you can actually look at companies and um, it's kind of I don't know. It seems a little strange to me in some regards, where I think people um, like that either used to work. I actually have the app on my phone. I'm pulling it up now. Um, that used to work at a company or that do work at a company will like give their salary and like rate the company. It's kind of just like a Yelp for wanting to work at a companies with some more information.
Yeah.
Um, and you can sometimes get that's all dependent on the participation of the people in in that company. So you may not always be able to find stuff there, but usually I will check that, especially if it's a bigger company,
Yeah.
because people will write reviews and like rank their experience working there with stars, similar like you would to like a movie review or a Yelp posting or something. But
Yeah, but of
it'll
course
give you
it's the internet, so
yeah. Some people you have to understand. Some people leave
it's
jobs
complicated.
bitter, and some people are just like, hey, yeah, there you go. Chuck just posted Glassdoor on there too. Um, so yeah, there are some tools I think. I mean, a very non-practical way. Like I said, I excuse me, I interviewed a lot in a period of time. Like I think I did 24 interviews in a year, and some of those brought offers, so I could always kind of measure
Yeah.
that against my expectation. But definitely, one of the things you have to consider is what you need to live on,
Mm,
right? And what you need to live, um, not necessarily a luxurious lifestyle, but a relatively comfortable lifestyle. A lifestyle where you can pay all your bills and where you can, maybe even sock away a little bit of money, um, and start from there, and realize that everything up from there is going to depend on the specific skills that you bring to the table and your experience level and all that kind of stuff. So that's a very good question, and I think a very difficult one to ask. Um, as they said in the room, there's information you can gather for your area. Um, definitely use that to your advantage. But sometimes, you just kind of have to wing it. And worst case scenario, I don't usually recommend doing this, but if you're really not sure, um, you could always tell them, you could always give them a number that maybe you're not sure about, and if they react negatively to that, be willing to negotiate that, provided that you don't start at that like comfortable living number, right? Like I need this to just get by, and then negotiate down from that. But if you start above that, you can usually negotiate down to a number that you can live on. Because I don't know, salary histories are good because that's what people have paid you, but so much geographical information and location and all that stuff factors into what you get paid.
Yeah.
It costs
And
a living.
also experience, and then also
Right.
yeah. So my advice is this information, like what other people are getting paid, is interesting and everything, but you have to figure out, like you're saying, you have to figure out what is your cost, like what is the
Yes.
the cost that you feel like you've put into the skills that you have, and like how much do you think that's worth. So I think traditionally people undersell themselves. Like I think
Yes.
other people are like, oh well, whatever, I've been doing this for 5 years or so I'm worth X dollars, and really they're not figuring it out. So they're not.
A lot of
Doing,
work goes into it. Yeah, you have to really know where you're going and what you're getting into, and obviously knowing things about your geographical area and what kind of because a lot of times you can find it based on like job title, and really anything kind of above and below that, I think is going to depend a lot on the company and how they're doing and what they're doing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that'd be my advice. I know it's not great, but if you take whatever information you can get out of websites and people and the Department of Labor and use it to your advantage, and just try to find a number that it's not so much, I don't even think it's so much about valuing yourself, because I don't think you can ever do that. I think it's about getting to that number that you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And if you're planning on, if you're married, or you're in a partnership or whatever, and you're planning on having a baby or adopting a baby or making some sort of lifestyle change like that, moving houses, doing something like that, that's all things you have to factor into what you're willing to live with.
And then that also factors into what you need to improve on.
Yes.
So like, what level do I need to get to sustain this lifestyle that I want to have? So yeah.
Yes.
I agree. So budgeting is important. So
yes. There's another one.
What?
This is actually a serious question here from. Are we done with that one?
Yeah, there's another question.
Yes. The Dragon Man Tank asked this one. How do you get your employer to budget for training? Which is another great question.
That is definitely a very great question. We just tell them that they have to. No.
I will leave.
Yeah, the ultimatum.
Go my route.
Let me go. Yeah, I would suggest being upfront with that as something that is something you're interested in. If you're coming to a new place, if you're already there, we've already talked about the idea of the dialogue and having the reviews and stuff, like really working in a career development goal system. So like really spend time on those. And I know it's really hard to, or at least it's hard for me to do the introspective thing and like come up with, well, here's these goals for me, because like I try to force them into, I want to make X progress on improving this particular system or whatever. So I tend to have trouble with the professional development goals as opposed to like just code or technical goals. So So I think it's very important to work on that with someone who is good at it. So if that's your manager, great. If it's not, find someone at the company who is good at that kind of stuff, or a friend or a mentor or whatever, and come up with, here's professional development goals I want to get to. Like I want to be able to understand this. And then from that, that's where you work in, how do I get there? So then you have that particular conversation with, here's where I need to be professionally. Here's how I want to get there. And if that includes training, that's kind of a required part of getting there. So you have to convince your boss of that. ultimately, and I know that a lot of people disagree with me on this, but ultimately you are the person who owns your career. So
Yes.
you are really responsible for funding all of your training, the skills that you receive. Honestly, like you ultimately are responsible for it. But a nice perk is a lot of companies do recognize that is a requirement that they are placing upon you to have a certain skill set. So they should be paying to get you that skill set.
Yes.
So it is a nice to have. It's not a requirement that a company does that. So for me, it would be I would just frame it from the standpoint of, I'm getting here because you want me to do X, X, and X. If you want that to happen, I have to have this particular knowledge. The only way for me to get that is through this training. So that's where it has to come from. So
Yeah.
either you give me, either I pay for it, and that involves reimbursement or a raise or whatever, or there's a training budget set up that allows us to do this, and I work within that. So
Yes.
that's my take on it. What do
Okay.
you think, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most of the other things we talked about tonight, definitely having a conversation. It's funny because as I've gotten into speaking and going to conferences and doing all that kind of stuff, it's one of the things I make sure that I ask about during the interview process. If going to conferences and having training materials, whether it's something like Nomad PHP or Daycam for developers, or any of the training, maybe it's a subscription to, you know, I don't know what's out there, Laracasts or NetToots or something.
NetTuts or PHP Architect the magazine or whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is. And just kind of seeing what their reaction to that is, because most people aren't. Oh yeah, we'll send you to every conference you want to go to. The answers tend to be a little bit more reserved, but if you're asking something like out of the question, you'll generally find that out too.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think in my experience, I've found that most of the people that you work with will not want to go to conferences.
Yep.
It's kind of I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, look at ZenCon and PHP Tech is kind of being some of the bigger conferences, and there's anywhere from 250 to 500 people. I've never been to ZenCon, so it might be bigger than that, but when you look at the those being kind of the preeminent conferences in terms of size and length and things like that, 250 people is a lot, and you can make a lot of good friends there. But in the scope of everybody that writes PHP, that's not. It's a very small percentage. So
Yeah.
if you have that opportunity to have that conversation with a boss, and mention that that's something that you're interested in, there's a very real possibility that no one in that company since he's been there has ever came and said that to him. Like that's probably or it doesn't come up very often. That's probably in most places true. And just kind of feel it out and see. And maybe they don't want to send you to conferences. Maybe they don't want to pay for a hotel and a flight and a conference ticket. But you can always negotiate something with them. Where maybe you cover the flight and they cover the hotel and the conference ticket, or if you can be flexible, if you can afford it and you can be flexible with them, see if they're willing to kind of negotiate some of that stuff with you. And then, yeah, I think things like buying books and buying subscriptions to training sites and tutorial sites and things like that. Most companies, for the relatively small price of buying a book or buying a subscription, would be excited to hear you say that you want to get better, and generally would kind of fork over the money for that kind of stuff pretty quickly. If they're not interested in you getting better, you kind of have to question whether or not you're actually going to get better there.
Yep.
But, if conferences are a deal breaker for you, that's obviously a harder sell because it's a lot more expensive.
Yep.
and bigger companies don't like to play favorites and just send you even if you're the only person that wants to go.
Which is unfortunate, but
Yeah, but
it's reality.
there's some conferences record talks, and there's a ton of good information that you can pay for that's relevant and accurate and legitimate. That really I can't see any reason for a company to say like, no, we're not going to buy you that cool new OAuth book that's coming out soon.
Yeah, is that a plug? He's plugging his own book on our show again.
Just as an example.
Yeah, great, fantastic. So, yeah, so I think that basically sums up our answer to that question. And since there is nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and say that we have talked long enough for this particular episode.
We've been on here for a while, haven't we?
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and call this one a wrap. So I'm not going to go through the list of our advice again, but
yeah, please don't.
Real advice, not our fake advice. Our real advice, I think, can be summed up with, know your position, or like know where your position in this world is and where you want to be. Actively work towards that, and you have to evaluate your current situation and how it's getting you there at all steps of the way. Is that kind of it?
Yeah, and I would just want to add, it's okay to be patient. It's okay to, if things aren't going well off the bat, it's okay to kind of wait it out and make sure that you're really sure about the decision that you're planning to make or thinking about making. And like you said, just to have open, to be honest and open with the people that are kind of in charge of your career development, from what they can provide you, your boss or your manager or whatever.
Yeah.
To be open and honest with them about what you're expecting and what your goals are, and how they can help you kind of realize those goals better, through resources or support or training or whatever it is. So that'd be the only thing I'd want to add.
Awesome. So that is episode 8 of the Loosely Coupled Podcast, Career Development, a Plan That Doesn't Suck.
Is that really what we're going to call it?
I just called it that.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for everyone who came out for our live, our first ever live recording. So
yeah,
thanks
guys.
everyone in the channel.
Girls.
We will see you next time.
Later.